Kitco News special coverage of Makori's annual Mainnet Summit is brought to you by Oasis Pro.
Welcome back to our coverage of the Mainnet conference in New York City. I'm Michelle Makori. This is Kitco News. It's been 2 years since El Salvador officially made Bitcoin legal tender in the country. On September 7th, 2021, El Salvador's parliament passed a law requiring all businesses to accept Bitcoin for transactions alongside the US dollar. So 2 years later, how has the Bitcoin experiment worked out for the Central American country? And can we expect other countries to move in the same direction? Here to answer those questions and more is Tristan Thoma, the Director of Government and Payments at AlphaPoint. Tristan played a big role in El Salvador's adoption of Bitcoin as national currency through his work on the Chivo wallet. Good to have you with us, Tristan.
It's good to be here.
Okay, so another exciting conference. I remember at the Bitcoin Miami, June of 2021, where President Bukele announced that they were going to make Bitcoin legal tender in El Salvador alongside with the US dollar. In September, the country's parliament passed the Bitcoin law, making all businesses in the country have to accept Bitcoin. Where did you come into this process?
AlphaPoint. So I work with AlphaPoint. We were involved in from the original stages of the conversations around what the system will be for allowing Salvadorans to access Bitcoin. Of course, on the day that the law was announced, the system was announced. AlphaPoint took a more significant role in the technology aspect of it in the months post the initial launch in collaboration with the government and all of the technology providers that were there on the ground. My particular role was coming in and working, leading the AlphaPoint team that provides technology. We've been powering digital asset infrastructure for 10 years. So as a white label software exchange provider, 10 years gave us enough experience and resilience really in being able to meet those needs and really provide a strong service.
Right, and then you subsequently spent about 1.5 years in El Salvador,
yes.
Seeing the process through. The launch wasn't that smooth, though, as I recall. I believe that there were some issues with getting the Chivo wallet downloaded, even though there was incentive for people to download it, being offered $30 worth of Bitcoin to get people started. So were you involved in that initial phase, or were you brought in to sort of streamline the process post that hiccup?
AlphaPoint's engagement more so has strengthened over time post the initial launch. What we allowed to do is a public upgrade of the KYC vendor. We work closely with all of, as I mentioned, all the technology providers, as well as the government itself to ensure that this fundamentally new technology, fundamentally new infrastructure, really gained its footing as quickly as possible, right? As with most new technologies, when we're breaking things, we learn. Luckily, we got to learn really fast and really make a reliable system quite quickly.
All right, so where are we now? How many Chivo wallets have been downloaded?
So there's a good article that notes over 70% of the country actually has downloaded the Chivo wallet, which is a big difference. If you recall that prior to the Bitcoin law, El Salvador had about 30% banking rate, right? So about 30% of Salvadorans were banked, leaving 70% underbanked. Since then, if we take that 70% that has downloaded or interacted with Chivo or Bitcoin, it's actually literally flipped the numbers. More than 40% difference, more than 40% additional Salvadorans have gained access to financial services, digital financial services, as a result of this law. Some through directly the Chivo wallet, some through other Bitcoin wallets that are available nationally. The beauty of it is that anybody can access Bitcoin through any either self-custodial wallet or custodial wallet on behalf of an institution. And what we've done is laid the groundwork and framework for allowing that system to work on a national scale.
The population of El Salvador, I believe, is around 6.3 million. So how many downloads? Do you have a number in terms of how many actual downloads of the Chivo wallet there have been?
I actually cannot speak on behalf of Chivo for the specific numbers,
Okay.
but we have seen, the vast majority of the country, as has already been noted, interact with it and understand it. There was actually quite a famous video about, the Bitcoin itself, that it was used for Bitcoin transactions initially. You had mentioned the kind of the reward or incentive for downloading the wallet. So that Bitcoin was used for Bitcoin transactions, right? Wallet to wallet, peer to peer. And that actually encourages the familiarity with digital transactions instead of just kind of going to.
And all of these wallets are downloaded on mobile, on a phone, or is there a desktop, laptop version?
Yeah,
as
there's
well?
mobile, there's laptop version. We've integrated even with like the hardware point of sale devices, even third-party point of sale devices. Like if you go to a store, there's not always a Chivo device, but there is a device that can take payments from the system, which is really integrating in a new level of day-to-day transactions.
So are people using Bitcoin and the Chivo wallet or other wallets for these daily transactions in the country? What goods, for example, are people purchasing?
Yeah, absolutely. It is used daily. I can speak for myself firsthand. When I lived there for the year and a half, I would, with Bitcoin, I could buy lunch at Wendy's or McDonald's if I wanted to not eat so healthy. Or if of course, I only order salads from McDonald's, like everybody.
There are actually more calories if you look at the dressing, but that's a whole other conversation.
You learn new things.
watch out for the dressing.
Yeah, every supermarket, Super Selectos, as an example, is the largest supermarket in the country. You go there every day, and they accept Bitcoin. And you can do it through either mobile or website or a point of sale device. You can do it on chain, like Bitcoin on chain. You can do it via Lightning. Sometimes it's through Chivo, sometimes it's through other technology partners that also provide Bitcoin.
So if you're at a Wendy's, for example, in El Salvador, you order your burger or your salad, and you're at the register, and how does that transaction work? Is everyone there fully conversant with the process? Break that down for us.
Yeah, so the way it works is generally there is a price denominated in dollars at first. There are some stores, I'll take Wendy's specifically because the video is from Wendy's. It's denominated in dollars, and then the price conversion from dollars to Bitcoin is done on the app. You make an invoice, or the teller would make an invoice, which is effectively a QR code. That includes the amount of Bitcoin that is due. Most of the time it's over Lightning because that's faster. And I just scan the QR code, I pay it. A second later, they get a big green check mark that says, good to go.
And in terms of the population running businesses, everybody is fully up to speed with this?
There is a process, absolutely, of education, right? If we look at any new technology, even take the example of debit cards or credit cards, when lines of credit were starting to be commercialized, it wasn't overnight adopted by everybody, even if it was legal, even if it was, accessible. Obviously, in El Salvador, there's been a much faster rate of adoption and education. There was actually recently announced a national kind of financial education endeavor and effort being incorporated into schools. I personally have worked with a company organization called Premere Bitcoin that does education for Bitcoin. We do some of their certification courses, and kids, interact with Bitcoin. They create a wallet. They send Bitcoin to and from a wallet. It is available, obviously, countrywide, and it is used countrywide. And person to person, there are still subjective experiences, right? Some people have more experience or less experience with debit cards in the US, as they have more or less experience with Bitcoin in El Salvador.
Okay, it brings up a whole other conversation about why you want to be using Bitcoin for micro transactions, especially seeing as it's been touted as a store of value asset. Well, we're going to unpack that in a little bit, but let's just focus further on this idea of the transactions. What are the majority type of transactions that are being used? For what kind of purchases? I can't imagine it's mostly for these small items at Wendy's, be it a burger or a salad.
We actually see, there is a range. Just walking around El Salvador and having experienced it firsthand, there's everything from, you can buy a house with Bitcoin, and those are, there are are definitely communities and conversations and organizations that help to facilitate that, or peer-to-peer transactions because it's legal tender.
Right.
All the way down to pupusas, the little kind of local food. It is a quite wide range, just as there are for dollars.
The idea, though, correct me if I'm wrong, one of the primary motivations was for Bitcoin to be used for remittances, for people to send money from overseas to friends, family, relatives in El Salvador. Has that been the primary use case?
It definitely is included in the use case, in the range of use cases. I can't speak on if it's the primary use case nationally. There are transactions done on Bitcoin that are inside of networks that we can see, and wallets you don't always necessarily know who owns them or where the geography is, even tracking IP or whatever kind of technical tools we might want to use. There's still information being gathered on how much is used when, where, and how. What we do is, we focus on bringing as resilient technology to make sure that if and when and as people want to transact, either in dollars when they interface with our systems, or in Bitcoin, then they can do so as quickly and seamlessly as possible.
We'll talk us through the interoperability then of the Chivo wallet with other wallets, with fiat currencies, with other cryptocurrencies. What is the range of interoperability that the Chivo wallet offers?
It's a beautiful approach that's been taken because in El Salvador, obviously, they have dollars, right? US dollars are the general fiat currency used there in the country. If I take a $20 bill from here, it's going to be the same $20 bill I spend at the store there. What we've successfully done is create an institution that can transact entirely collaborating with all of the national and international banks, compliant with all of the national and international banking laws, to be confident in the money that interacts also with Bitcoin, right? Bitcoin being a new asset, not always very clear. We work closely with the crypto AML companies and crypto AML experts globally to ensure confidence so that banks in El Salvador, when they interact with dollars, they can receive those dollars, they can send those dollars. Card transactions can be made with institutions that also interact with Bitcoin. That's an incredible accomplishment, with zero OFAC violations, right? With full compliance and collaboration between these institutions in an effort to be cohesive. And it's been successful so far. What we see is that it actually has increased financial inclusion, it's increased financial resilience of the system itself, and there is a net benefit to the people, and myself having the firsthand experience living in the country.
How has it increased financial resilience?
One of the things that we see, historically with El Salvador, right, there was the Salvadoran colon, which was used, I believe it was 1982 to 2001.
Their previous national currency.
Correct.
Before they switched off to the dollar.
Correct.
Yeah.
The previous national currency. And as all countries, go through interactions with different national currencies, as you've spoken on a lot of your interviews, the different statuses and quote unquote competitions of currencies, Bitcoin's status in El Salvador and in the world is quite unique in that it is a non-government currency that acts as a digital bearer instrument, similar to, one might say, cash, or one might say gold or diamonds or some other commodity, but digital. And what El Salvador has effectively done is create a framework to take this digital bearer instrument and interact confidently with the more enclosed and controlled legacy financial system. So somebody that may not be able to go through KYC or may be a Bitcoin maxi for whatever reason, they can still be part of the legacy financial system and do so with confidence, right? The bank can take that money with confidence. That's an incredible empowerment.
What about convertibility? How do you move back from Bitcoin to USD or other fiat? Is that via an exchange? Is that via the wallet as an intermediary? How does that process work in terms of on-ramps and off-ramps with banks? Break that down for us.
Yeah. So AlphaPoint, as a company, we are at our core an exchange provider, right? So we actually execute the exchanges on behalf of all of our customers around the world. This is one of the strongest points that we come in to provide. So as Bitcoin is exchanged for dollars, we provide the whole ecosystem for of course, executing the exchange, but also providing the reporting and compliance requirements to, pass along to the banks. Chivo works closely with all of the banks nationally to ensure that there is integration with those banks, so that Salvadorans who have bank accounts can also use Chivo, and that's cohesive, right? We do the same thing with ATMs. There are hundreds of ATMs that Chivo has around the country. You can take cash and get Bitcoin. You can take Bitcoin and get cash.
So I have the Chivo wallet in El Salvador. My good friend in Chicago wants to send me some Bitcoin, sends it directly to my wallet. I'm assuming there's some transaction fee.
Anytime there is an on-chain, there is really a transaction fee with Bitcoin regardless. If your friend in Chicago wants to send you Bitcoin, Chivo is specifically only for Salvadorans. So maybe you or I might not have Chivo.
Right.
But we could have a Bitcoin wallet in El Salvador.
Let's pretend I live in El Salvador.
Right.
Let's pretend I took advantage of the residency that is offered as part of this Bitcoin and I invested into the country. I believe that that's been a big trend that we're seeing with Bitcoiners.
Right.
Max Kaiser and such, hanging out at El Zonte Beach over there. But okay, for argument's sake, I have El Salvadorian citizenship, residency. I have the Chivo wallet. Friend, family in Chicago wants to send me some money. I receive it in the wallet. Can I then go and effectively cash it out into paper currency, USD?
Yes. So Michelle, the Salvadoreña, you would send a Bitcoin address or a QR code, and your friend in Chicago would send the Bitcoin. It would arrive in your wallet. And within Chivo, the integration is there such that you can go to an ATM and take cash out if you want to. You can spend it at any other place that Bitcoin is accepted. So with any external Bitcoin wallet, be it Chivo or not, and this is of critical importance of interoperability. Or you can take it out to your bank account. If you have a Banco Premere or Banco Fomento or any of the national Salvadoran banks, you could convert it to dollars in the app, right? As it's shown in a lot of the kind of UI mockups. You can convert it to dollars and take it to your bank. If you want to keep dollars, that's not a problem.
Okay. Have there been any hacks with regards to this whole process?
Very proud to say there have not been. There have definitely been attempts. We take great pride in, again, the past 10 years of creating and improving this technology for digital assets. I mean, we work with the top cybersecurity experts in the world. We are SOC 1, Type 1, and Type 2 compliant for financial institutions, right? We uphold ourselves to the highest degree, right? When CME Group, for example, wanted to do a crypto project, they came to us, as well as with the Royal Mint. We've had a lot of reputable partners over the years. Okay,
so no hacks. So on the upside there. Well, look, there are a number of bigger issues that sort of come to mind. Before we get into the purchase point that El Salvador entered the Bitcoin market and where the price is now, and whether that was really such a good economic decision, you have to factor in the volatility of Bitcoin, right? And the question of why would you want to use Bitcoin to buy a Wendy's burger or salad or what have you if the consensus is, or the hope is, that it is going to be an appreciating asset, a store of value asset, it's a deflationary asset by nature. Why does it make sense for people to use it for daily business transactions as legal tender?
Yeah, I think one of the key approaches that I take in this is focus on empowerment and optionality more so than kind of making decisions on behalf of any particular person or citizen, right? Bitcoin is unique in that it's used now as a daily transactional currency in addition to the store of value. So our interaction with it up until 2021 was exclusively as this store of value. There was no legal framework to interact with it as a daily transactional currency. It was never legal tender before. There was never a government or legal framework to use it in that way. So we have fundamentally shifted the paradigm of what Bitcoin can be to include daily transactional uses. Strike, for example, in their business, they use Bitcoin on Lightning as solely a transactional vehicle and they settle in fiat currencies on both sides, which is a really interesting approach. I think the use of Bitcoin as a technology, fundamental technology, is being evolved, and because the use is being evolved, the general paradigm and perspective on how it could be used is also evolving.
Okay, but there is a contradiction between HODL, hold on for dear life, diamond hands, keep this asset. This is your way to protect against fiat debasement, devaluation, inflation, geopolitical risks, all of the bad things that can happen, and using this for micro transactions. I mean, it seems to me to be inherently incompatible in many ways, just like I don't go and take my gold coins and use them to purchase things.
Yeah, I don't necessarily disagree, Michelle. Okay. It's the subjective, like the personal choice of, right, if I don't have a bank account, or if I'm not bullish on dollars personally, or if I'm not bullish on Bitcoin personally, then I can make that choice. In El Salvador, a lot of people don't have bank accounts, as was already mentioned. So they might come into the financial economy, the digital financial economy, through Bitcoin. And that would be their way to transact. And if you as a merchant, one of the features that we power is kind of an auto convert. So if I'm a Bitcoin maxi and you love dollars, then I can send you Bitcoin and you will receive dollars, or vice versa. And that simple ability enables an open, empowered, really ecosystem.
Yeah.
So when Bitcoin is up or down, it kind of doesn't matter. We've seen transactional and trading activity when Bitcoin is skyrocketing and when it's going down.
Right. I mean, I get your point that it allows for more financial freedom and more financial choice. And I'm certainly all about freedom and choice. And it certainly makes sense in countries where the national currency is plummeting. Like we're seeing huge Bitcoin adoption in Argentina, I believe at higher rates than El Salvador, because they want to mitigate the fact that the Argentinian peso is doing so poorly. But in terms of the idea that Bitcoin was going to come in and help El Salvador's economy, has it done that? What have been the benefits for the people of El Salvador 2 years on since Bitcoin was made legal tender?
Yeah. I'll answer in two parts. One, couple metrics, and two, my personal experience from being there, right? So metrics are, right, we've seen a 30% increase in tourism, for example. That is a material impact on the country. There's a 10% increase in GDP, which is a material impact on the country. These are publicly available statistics.
A 10% increase in GDP.
I'm sorry?
And you said a 10% increase in
Correct.
GDP.
Correct.
And that has been attributed to Bitcoin, or in the time frame since Bitcoin was adopted, and so we're making that connection.
In the time frame. Yeah. There have been a lot of efforts done, obviously. A lot of things have happened in 2 years, right? Not just the inclusion of Bitcoin as legal tender. It is part of what I've seen, it actually lends well into my personal experience. My personal experience is that walking down the streets of San Salvador, where I lived, and going all around the country to El Zonte and El Tunco, the beaches, going to the lake, I see and have seen a social impact, a social improvement in being able to walk safely down the street. Not just my experience, but there is a common conversation occurring in El Salvador. Of course, this is not exclusively attributed to Bitcoin. An attempt to correlate causality to Bitcoin would be interesting, but it is absolutely part of the empowerment, the financial empowerment, financial education empowerment of the citizens in El Salvador for that, right? As infrastructure evolves, right? I saw new roads get paved, saw airport infrastructure improve, I saw, even real estate go up, and part of that push for the improvement of the country in the subjective experience living there is my ability to interact with Bitcoin and use different financial tools as I see fit.
Okay. Well, I know President Bukele has gotten some criticism because when he really moved into the Bitcoin space, it was near all-time highs. November 2021, we had Bitcoin at an all-time high. I believe in September, it was around 45,000. Now it's at around 27,000. And people have been questioning the wisdom of taking it on from a governmental perspective. Is that something you can weigh in on?
From a national investment macroeconomic perspective, I would defer to the government to comment on that. But what I have seen is, once again, going back to the empowerment and education aspect of what the very real and undeniable impact has been, is people understand in a real way that digital money can be transacted overseas. And that can be done more easily and seamlessly than it was perceived as before. Less people are underbanked, meaning they have access to financial services. They have access to banking. They can take cash out from under their bed and put it into a digital financial state, right? Into a digital state that allows them to transact with businesses in Colombia or Costa Rica. And that is, as a macro push, empowering. Like I use an interesting example of, imagine, when internet was perceived as this kind of powerful technology and we're going to figure out how to use it. Well, imagine a country made it so that all of their citizens had free access to internet. Where would that country be 10, 20, 30 years down the line? Just the mental map and understanding of technology that will result in their capability to use it. It was empowered. And I think those long-term effects will be seen over the coming years.
Okay. I mean, I know that there have been several issues with regards to global credit markets and how the Bitcoin move has impacted El Salvador there, and the IMF taking issue with El Salvador adopting Bitcoin. And also there was the cancellation of issuing the volcano bonds. I believe that they were going to do that. And then there's been some backpedaling there. Not your department, but valid points to address. I get that you're on the technical side of the execution. So in terms of the technical side of the execution, and as someone that is helping to push digital wallets, crypto wallets, not just in El Salvador, but globally, do you see a move to be cashless? Do you see the two coexisting, or is the end goal for there to be no paper currency?
I can speak on behalf of myself. I would see all of the evolutions as addition, right? I don't see it so much as a revolution as an evolution. And the opportunity to allow people to use digital services when it is most appropriate, and or to use cash when it is most appropriate, that's a subjective choice that people make, right? There's often...
Hopefully it's up to the people to make that choice. Hopefully
Yes.
It still becomes a choice for the people to make.
So I personally advocate for that, right? And what we've seen in El Salvador, it's part of the beauty of the way that El Salvador has gone about it, right? They've empowered... It's not just a cash in system, right? It's cash out. It is an addition to everything that was available before. Now you have additional tools. Ideally, now that we are expanding conversations with other countries that, will bring in either CBDC systems or an integrated system of a digital fiat currency along with perhaps an open network currency like Bitcoin, and even potentially a CBDC, right? You could have three in the same. In El Salvador, for example, there's dollars and Bitcoin. Nigeria has the e-Naira. There could be a system where there's e-Naira and Bitcoin and Naira, right? So if a financial institution wants to provide the three, we can provide the exchange, the infrastructure, the security for the movement of those monies and exchanges for those monies, and allow for financial inclusion the way that Bitcoin uniquely does, and benefits from e-Naira as they come up, or if there are risks, then people have the opportunity to interact with different ones. This really is kind of an ideal state where there is an interoperable world.
Right. And I get that you're not behind policy here. You're not making the decisions. You're just helping facilitate the tech that goes along with this process. We did see that the Central African Republic was looking at making Bitcoin legal tender as well. I believe they passed legislation to that effect. How has that played out? What's the progress been on that front? And is there an AlphaPoint involvement there?
Yeah, we've been in communication with them for a long time. I did a panel last year with one of the advisors to the president, and we've been in touch as they are evolving their approach. I believe they did become officially the second country to legalize Bitcoin as tender. At the same time, they're creating their own infrastructure and token system, We've been in collaboration with them in that process. We don't directly power any technology systems in the country at this point. There's little infrastructure that's live in production there, but they are going that direction.
But you can't really use Bitcoin for transactions in the Central African Republic at present.
I'm actually planning to be there towards the end of the year, beginning of next year. So I'll get back to you on my experience.
Update on that. Yeah. We'll get an update on that. Are there any other countries that are looking to make this move that you have on your radar from a technical insider point of view?
There is a lot of conversations, as you know well, right? Most countries in the world are looking at some form of cryptocurrency system, right? Most of the time that's a CBDC, and the term CBDC can be understood in different ways without going into commentary right now on that. We are in conversation with several institutions, governments, associations on how it can be responsibly done. Because up until now, there is fundamentally one country that has created a framework for a cryptocurrency to be used nationally and has commercialized it and made it available for all of its citizens that are actually using it day to day, right? So having this unique experience.
And we're talking about
China? We're talking about El Salvador here.
Okay. You're calling Bitcoin as a cryptocurrency. Okay,
correct.
Fine. I thought we were on the CBDC conversation. Okay.
Ideally, they would interact. Ideally, they would interface with each other because CBDCs, at least from the perspective of those designing them and minting them, it's not intended to be a nefarious, horrible thing, right? The objective from a lot of the designers, from the conversations I've had, are to increase conveniences, increase the ability for international trade or transactions, or speed up settlements, which at least from a premise are good. And there are certain elements and features of open network systems, currencies like Bitcoin, that are also beneficial. So ideally, they would work in tandem.
Ideally, they would work in tandem. One could make the argument that Bitcoin is a competition to fiat currency. And sometimes things may start off with good intentions, like a central bank digital currency. But of course, one of the points of concern is that once you implement it and there's a change in leadership or a change in intentions, it becomes very, very, very problematic to undo the damage if you have a currency that is programmable, and if you have a currency that allows for complete surveillance and total lack of privacy and anonymity. But we will not go down the CBDC road. I always just like to point out the pros and the cons, and for many people, the cons outweigh the pros in terms of the slippery slope that may lead to a dystopian 1984 Orwellian-like existence. But the technology is not necessarily the issue here. But back to the original question, are you seeing any other countries looking to adopt Bitcoin as legal tender based on your work?
Yes. Well, in short, there are conversations from many countries. Primarily, Latin America is very active, obviously. We started in El Salvador. We're in conversations with a few different other regions throughout Latin America. I can't give specific.
I was going to say, can you give us any names of any countries that are actively talking to you guys about helping them potentially launch Bitcoin as legal tender?
I hope to be able to share more in the near future, as you should ask. But it's your job to ask.
But there are several countries, you say, in Latin America that are...
The fundamental development of understanding how Bitcoin can be integrated with legacy financial systems really is the objective, right? If we can provide a system that will be one of the providers for allowing that to happen, wonderful. Regardless, it will be beneficial, as we've seen from inspiration in El Salvador. It can be beneficial not as competition. I mean, Bitcoin in El Salvador has not de-dollarized El Salvador, right? There's still transactions in dollars.
Right.
What it has done is added to the availability of financial inclusion and empowerment. And so to the extent that we can provide a framework for businesses to be able to do that in other countries, or take example and inspiration from the benefits that El Salvador has seen and make those key and apparent for other countries, then we can see evolutions, regardless of CBDC involvement, of the fundamental empowerment.
All right, but in terms of countries looking to adopt Bitcoin as legal tender, you can't give me any straight answers there, but there are some conversations happening.
There are conversations.
In Latin
Latin America, Africa, even Middle East, South Asia. It really is a global conversation. I got to meet with some of the designers of Nika, even from the EU, from Brussels recently. Spent some time in Brussels, and there is a genuine desire to learn about the experience in El Salvador, which I think is incredibly valuable, right? The media has captured obviously the things that it has, and my firsthand experience includes benefits, right, that are not always highlighted.
As an individual, speaking as Tristan, do you see Bitcoin ever becoming some kind of reserve currency or having a similar status as gold in terms of national currencies or CBDCs somehow being pegged, backed by Bitcoin? Do you ever see Bitcoin serving as a reserve? Being held by central banks?
Yes. I actually did a talk recently in Europe on this. The vision really is that Bitcoin will hold a very special place in the global economic sphere, as there are dollars and there are yuan and shillings and pesos and all of the other fiat currencies. And those currencies are backed by governments, and they have their own denominations and market values based on the performance of those governments geopolitically and or commercially. Bitcoin, I foresee as having a very unique place integrated alongside those currencies, just as there are, let's say, gold derivatives virtually, there is a Bitcoin fundamental asset virtually. And that asset will have its own framework for trading, for commerce. It will have financial instruments created from it, just as there's already Bitcoin lending, right? There's loan to value with Bitcoin. If I can give, let's say $1,000 of Bitcoin and get $1,200 of USDC. I can trade that USDC for Bitcoin. We're kind of already seeing instruments being created with Bitcoin. Those will likely increase in popularity, increase in use, and Bitcoin over time will find its place as the digital non-governmental asset that is resilient to any geopolitical, let's say, fluctuations. I mean, fundamentally, you and I both, and everybody watching this, has had a parent or grandparent at some point in some compromised geopolitical situation, has been a refugee. And if we acknowledge that resilience of financial systems in those times is critical, it has relied up until now on gold and alternative assets, diamonds, right? You get what you can get. But for those that don't have physical access to those, with the proliferation of internet and hyperconnectivity, what if everybody at any point in the world could make the choice of, when I want to interact with a government currency, I will take full advantage of all the benefits of that. The conveniences, the payment channels, the credit lines, the instruments. I'll take advantage of that, and that will have its place. And to the extent that I want to interact with Bitcoin for its unique aspects and features, then I can. And I think over time it will gain that mature footing in place. The price fluctuation, I'm actually honestly less curious and worried about. I think the market will dictate that. But what the position will be globally and economically is a very unique digital non-governmental asset that I can interact with as a means of either trading currency or financial resilience.
All right, so Bitcoin is here to stay for the long run.
I believe so.
Okay.
I believe so.
Well, thank you so much. Really appreciate you sharing your thoughts with us. Good to see you. And we'll catch up with you when you're back from the Central African Republic.
I look forward to it.
Okay, thank you. And as always, thank you for watching. From me, Michelle Makori, and the rest of the Kitco team, make sure to subscribe if you're watching us on YouTube, and we'll see you next time.
Kitco News special coverage of Masari's annual Mainnet Summit is brought to you by Oasis Pro.